Here at the NBA.com, this is John's report. It's for the 28th, almost the end of the month. It was a nice bull run after the NVIDIA earnings here, but we'd already had the magenta over yellow on the MBI reading, so it was starting a short cover rally within the broader week setup, and then we ended up with orange dip underneath green the other day as well. So that everything lining up, but this is all coming off rising gold, so we've already seen the turn in the shakeout in that. Now, believe that we will get shakeout crossover here. Let me verify real quick. You can't see it; it's below the graph, but yeah, shakeout yellow above magenta from that standpoint, so that's all good stuff. From an NQ standpoint, clearly everything's supporting right off that 50%. Bouncing from there is kind of critical, and you can see magenta taking yellow at that particular case. It's got to hold it now, though, because this becomes kind of critical. Any weakness in this one, and I would expect a bigger decline built into that. A lot of help, though, with oil's eased. It still hasn't gotten any dramatic improvement. We did get a word from Kuwait net that they've pretty much got about 70% of their pre-war production exiting the strait now. So clearly, U.S. getting the mines cleared. There's traffic happening, which is probably why I don't hear about it on the news or anything, because there's nothing wrong going on there. So clearly, Iran's ability to do things has been degraded if they're announcing that they cleared the mines and stuff like that. That's easily, uh, you know, thwarted as far as news story if it wasn't happening. So, but again, that premium is there because the conflict can start again. Supposedly, Iran and Oman have agreed on some kind of pricing schedule for going through the strait. It's impossible to, and this is what people deal with when it comes to the risk element. It's like you got counter stories going all over the place. What is the general reality? Well, obviously, you're going to look and see how many barrels are coming out every day. That's literally where it's at. Um, Very exciting with the CIA coming into Russia for a meeting, and then the whole threat with Estonia and the EU thinking they're so close to war with Russia because Russia just really, for some reason, would need to. I mean, they can't even get past Ukraine, but somehow they want to go into Europe. Um, that you could have wondered the logic in some of these guys, but nice flag, right there, kind of pretty. See that develop in the charts very often. It's uh, kind of a nice one. Anyway, they're a little surprised because the U.S. Economy wasn't as horrible as was made out to be. Yes, the debt is still a problem, but you got quantitative easing happening on the back end, and it's kind of softening things. But the real problem is the built-in inflation and the rate increase setup. Uh, is problematic. I mean, it's a double-edged sword because the higher interest rates go, the worse it gets from the debt standpoint, and it's a self-fueling, you know, crisis. The reality is, it's like what stops you from moving rates down to zero during a time of economic strain when it comes to the oil and that you would free up a lot of capital and things, but talk to these people about their version of economics. Who knows? Gold, the tiny little setback on the positive news. Not so much for Bitcoin continuing to make its push, kind of cleared out all their shorts, but you're right up at that previous peak resistance in the 83 range. So we'll see if it's able to break through there. It's a little soft right there. You need a gentle push back up here, and that would be enough to sustain it. This is what it looked like intraday. We had a nice big move, but then there was a decent amount of fill back in there. We had a positive extreme on this one. I filled it immediately. And then by the end of the day, it balanced out towards the upside of things, which wasn't too big a shock. It didn't look so clean from 5K in the paint bar until later in the day after we had the big run up here with a nice clean move up, retrace, and then the second move was pretty clean. But then we get all these positive extremes to refill, even going all the way back to here, and it's exactly what it did. So it was all pretty straightforward from that standpoint. It was much cleaner, I think, from my 2500 tick chart. And we ended up with some really unique situations that developed within it. You look at these two setups, and they look remarkably similar, but very different in their character. The first one, you're short with the MBI white coming up above the red and magenta below 33. It wasn't quite a DOC spread at that particular point. Um, the difficulty is you're above plus 15 with your magenta and yellow on the shakeout. Cross over to the next one, and you end up at the peak with a nice spike of MBI white. At the same time, you end up with the pivot below 25. Could have taken any of the couple of these. Once this went passive and MBI white crossed above, it was clean to go. So there was 2 bar capability within that one. And yeah, the cascade lower, nice. You ended up with magenta leading early. Could have covered at that particular point, could have covered at the cross of steel right back here over orange. That typically does it, even the dip below 7.5, but at that particular point, you also had green crossing and then completed uh, that whole setup. But even from the green, long coming back up, same situation, MBI white spike, and then just the magenta fading back underneath, and that was a pretty short move. Popped back up again, and then rinsed and repeated. What becomes an interesting one is later in the day after we get the same back and forths. These are all the same repeating cycle of that setup over and over. Uh, what was neat though is when you start to watch the long runs and you get that beautiful DOC white and green stays above it the whole time until it flips. And you get the brief retrace, and then it makes another attempted run where the green tries to stay over that, but it was a little bit sloppier. That's when you know things are getting a little bit top heavy, and that was where uh, that little dip came kind of really nice and clean there. You ended up with a clean DOC spread, matched it with the MBI readings and that, so that was all pretty congruent from that standpoint. But then you ended up with MBI white staying in the lead throughout all of that, bouncing up and down, back and forth. Some of the stuff could be trying when you're like live in it. I'm like watching this thing spike back above the 50, and I'm like, what the heck? You get the MBI clearly in the lead, and sure enough, just little pokes. And in that particular case, you end up with the same situation. You end up with magenta taking over, and you ended up with your later, right after spike, but you'd already dipped below the 7.5. You'd already crossed the magenta, but then you end up getting this interesting story here where you end up where the always a buy, cyan under red, beautiful run. And you notice how you get the steep character move of steel below cyan. Well, then fast forward just a fraction and you get just the inverse of that situation beautifully. So you see the corollary flip between cyan to green, and when it flips, and then that steel stays above in a protracted short scenario, and until it literally right over here when it crossed back below, you knew that the party was ending, and then it was just a matter of waiting for a shakeout to pop up over, and it did that right there. So you ended up with the cross of uh, shakeout yellow over magenta. And, fine, yes, you could have gone out any of the earlier ones towards the low. And, I often do that. I'll just take the 0% just because, and you wait for a pop from there, because a lot of times I'll take the 0, wait for a pop to the 23, and you can kind of rinse and repeat a couple of different times, but makes it nice. And that led to a decent run until right towards the closing bell. And then we ended up with a nice dip down. And same transition right there. Orange underneath, then green takes over, runs it, ends up with a nice short right about here, but a 2-zone move in a single bar. I'm not going to take it. So it was a matter of waiting for the MBI pivots. And in this case, it didn't pivot. It was just heading straight down, and you get a move back to the 100% while you're still within the short configuration. So taking it up above the 76 at least, much smarter move. And that was a clean one that just popped out a few minutes back, and we're now back into a tick rally that's just kind of consolidating here in the Asia. It's just about over. We're about to start European session. So anyway, that's long and short of it. Just thought I'd run those through. That way you could see how the different points played out the other day, and it was all fairly clear. That's from a 2500 tick. It's a lot of points. Anyway, have a good one. Trade well. Anything relevant, I'll certainly put on the team chat.